It's a little bit slow then. Okay. How about to make it get in here? Good evening. I'd like to call this Wednesday, August 9th, 2023 meeting of the City of Manassas Park Planning Commission to order. The time is 7 p.m. My name is Lester Finkel. Sitting this evening are Martha Collier, John Evans, Alana Munsing, and Michael Beckett's. First order of business is the moment of silence and Pledge of Allegiance. Commissioner Evans, will you lead us?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next agenda item is the approval of the agenda. Any changes to the agenda this evening? Seeing none, I'll call for a motion to approve the agenda as is.
So moved.
Motion, second.
Second.
Second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next item is the adoption of minutes for the June 14th, 2023 meeting. Any changes to those meeting minutes? I don't have any. Seeing none, then I'll call for a motion to adopt the meeting minutes for June 14th, 2023 meeting as is.
Moved.
Motion, second.
Second.
Second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. At this time, would like to offer if there are any members of the public present to speak. Not seeing any, we'll move along. We have a public hearing this evening, zoning ordinance text amendment ZOTA number 23-05, short-term rentals. I'll open the public hearing. The time is 7:02.
Good evening.
Administrator Berry, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. This is zoning ordinance text amendment 2305, and it's dealing with short-term rentals. In case, I'm sure everybody knows what they are, but in case there are people who are not familiar or don't know that the terminology of a short-term rental, we're really talking about Airbnb rentals. Typically, you rent out your dwelling, a part of it or in its entirety for paying guests. And it is your personal residence or whoever's living in that dwelling. And so like other Northern Virginia jurisdictions, we have wanted to regulate these for a while. And so we are presenting the zoning ordinance text amendment for the land use regulations, and with the governing body, there will probably be an accompanying taxation ordinance along coupled with the use. So for the zoning ordinance text amendment, we're going to be adding two new definitions: short-term rental, of course, and then the short-term rental operator. And the zoning ordinance definition certainly goes into a little more detail, but it basically says that you can rent it for any dwelling for staying or lodging or just habiting the dwelling purposes for any time under a 30-day period, and you can rent out the whole place or just a portion of it. And of course, it's in for payment. And we are defining the short-term rental operator because that term is used within the zoning ordinance text amendment throughout the proposed new section. So that is anybody who's permitted to operate a short-term rental, but that could mean not only an owner, but also a tenant of the property. And we also say that there's only can be one short-term rental operator per dwelling at a time. So that way you won't have multiple people if it's a shared unit coming and applying for the same dwelling unit. So here are the list of limitations that we have. What we are proposing with this amendment is a maximum of 180-day rental nights, a maximum occupancy of 6 people, unless the square footage or the sleeping areas don't have the required egress that would limit those numbers. And no more than 1 rental contract per night, and each person who is staying during that rental period is supposed to be part of the same contract. And we are prohibiting any type of events such as weddings or parties, banquets, anything that may be like a music concert where you have people come and pay a fee. So any of that will be prohibited, and that is supposed to be part of the rental contract. So recreational vehicle, we're explicitly prohibiting the use of that for short-term rental, even though we do have in the ordinance a recreation vehicle can't be used as a dwelling. And then there's a zoning permit required, and that permit is valid for 2 years and renewal is required. So the permit requirements, of course, are an application fee and a $200, or excuse me, the application fee, which is $200, and an application for the short-term rental. And what you need to provide are forms of identification for residency purposes. The residency requirement is for somebody who's resided at that property for 7 of the last 12 months. And so they would need to verify that through demonstrating government-issued ID and also mortgage statement or maybe even a utility bill saying, proving that they've had the residency there. And one thing that we did add, which wasn't part of the advertised amendment, was a alternate caretaker. I thought that was especially important to have the applicant provide a contact information with phone number and name that consents to saying, if the operator's not available, then you can call me in case the lodgers have any concerns or emergencies. So, and then finally, we are requiring a site plan that which shows the property, not a full site plan, but just a aerial view of the property. That's how I would interpret it, showing where the parking is going to go. There are going to be parking requirements for the short-term rental. And we also were asking for a consent form, so we, as staff, have access to the dwelling as part of the approval process. And that is only under circumstances if we get a complaint, and then we have the ability to go in and inspect. And then finally, property owner authorization if the operator is a tenant of the dwelling. Just like other Northern Virginia jurisdictions, we are looking for safety requirements as part of the approval process. So they will have to demonstrate that the dwelling has these 3 to 4 options, which is fire extinguisher, interconnected smoke detectors. So that means like when you press 1, they all go off. Now, older homes typically don't have that, especially the ones on the western side, unless they've done an addition or improvement, would they potentially have that. But smoke detectors weren't even required back then. So that it's definitely a safety factor, and certainly we do want to see that. And other jurisdictions have this provision listed as well. A carbon monoxide detector if there's a gas appliance in the home. And then finally, direct egress for any of the sleeping areas, meaning, means to escape if there's an emergency. So the parking restrictions that we are proposing are twofold. One, how many spaces that is required for the particular type of dwelling unit, and also the maximum number of larger vehicles that can be parked on the property. So for single-family and two-family dwellings, we're requiring a minimum of 2 parking spaces, and these are off-street, of course, or in a designated parking area, and then for two-family dwellings. And we don't have any two-family dwellings in Manassas Park, but we have now defined that term, so that's why that's identified. And then for townhouse and multifamily dwellings, we're requiring a minimum of 1 space, and then allowing no more than 1 guest vehicle at those type of dwellings. So, of course, as part of the permit process, we did want a little bit of control if there's some people or operators that don't follow the rules. So we do list out how a permit can be revoked or why. So there are these 4 requirements, which are failure to comply with the regulations, if you have 2 or more violations in a year, and then refusal to cooperate if there is a complaint or concern, and then failure to register the dwelling as a short-term rental if it's being operated, or renewal of the permit. So I did want to discuss with the Planning Commission 2 issues, because this is certainly kind of debatable, was the number of maximum days for the short-term rental. I know some jurisdictions have as little as 60 days. This 100 days, approximately half the year. So I really like your feedback on what you think is a reasonable amount. We also saw some other ordinances where differentiated between how many nights for the whole unit, and then like unlimited for if it was just a portion or room of the unit. And then the number of off-street parking requirements, as well as the restriction on how many vehicles can be at the property when it is serving as a short-term rental. The one I think is most debatable is the townhouse, because many townhomes have 2 parking spaces. So that might be something you might want to recommend, that they can have or require 2 spaces and can have no more than 2 vehicles there. I think that's worthy of discussion. I just felt that because some townhomes have driveways and others don't, I'd rather kind of be a little more conservative in that and just only allowing 1 and requiring 1 space. But I'd like to hear the feedback from the Planning Commission on that. And some of the jurisdictions don't even have a maximum guest vehicles. So if you think that provision's too restrictive, then I'm happy to hear those type of changes. Staff is recommending approval of the amendment as written, but I'll be happy to entertain any changes that we just went over if you'd like. Thank you.
Comments from commissioners?
I have a question.
Commissioner Beckett?
Thank you. This is a point of clarification. Could you talk about the residency requirement a little bit more? The definition says that any short-term rental operator must be a primary resident of the property. And so if a person wanted to sort of have someone use their whole home, that the primary resident would then have to vacate the home in order to sort of do a short-term sort of lease?
No, the resident requirement is the past 12 months. So if they're if they want to move out afterwards, that's fine. No, we just need to demonstrate that they've been there for 7 out of the last 12 months to indicate that it was just not potentially purchased as a short-term rental where they just bought it a month ago and now are putting on the short-term rental market, if you will. So yes, it's the previous
So
year.
it would limit business opportunities for people to purchase a property
Yes.
specifically for this purpose.
Well, that's the intent. I'm sure there are probably creative people, but yes, that's absolutely the intent of that, to kind of make sure that it's not, you're still maintaining it as a primary residence, whether it's rented or owned.
Okay, and so the maximum number of rental nights, if you can only lease lease for a total of 180 days, actually then locks you into, like, you would actually have to shorten that in order to meet the residency requirements, right? Because if in the previous 12 months, you had to have lived there for 7, but 180 days is actually 6 months, that you can't do both at the same time.
That's correct.
Okay.
Right, so they'd have to demonstrate living there for 7 months, and then they come in and apply for the permit, and then they can have a maximum of 180 days after that,
And the permit,
during that calendar year, so it's per calendar year.
and then how do people report the number of nights used? I'm getting to the question about enforcement and compliance. And so if I get my permit on January the 1st of 2023, according to the way the ordinance is written, I don't have to re-up for 2 years. So what do I do in the interim to demonstrate compliance with the ordinance?
Well, we're not asking them to demonstrate that they are doing 180 days or tracking their number of nights. Now, I think that might be something that can be reported as part of the taxation ordinance, but it is really on an honesty basis until we do get a complaint. And given the fact that it is 180 days, that tends to be harder to monitor as opposed if you limited it to 3 months, 90 days, or even 60, which I think is a little too conservative, but again, yes. So that's an excellent question.
And just one final question. How many homeowners or operators do you think we have now?
Oh, goodness.
Like, is this a solution in search of a problem, or?
No, I think we do have several. It's really hard, until you actually register for the property, you don't know what the address is. I have gone on and looked. We've had some complaints kind of come in to our code enforcement office, so I do believe they are being used as short-term rental, and in fact, I did have a person come in last week asking if we had a short-term rental permit, and I said, well, not yet, but we're getting close. So I don't know how much, but they're certainly there.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Collier?
On the 180 days, is that per year or per rental?
It's per calendar year.
Okay, so I couldn't do 6 months and you move out and tomorrow somebody else move in for 6 months.
Correct.
It's only a 6 months rental. And we're calling it short-term rentals, but you also referred to Airbnb. They're, in my opinion, they're two different things. Airbnb is somebody's coming to DC for vacation. That's not 6 months. So where
Well, the
is
6 months is the maximum period of how many days that dwelling unit can be rented out as a short-term rental. You're not renting it for the entire 6 months. So it's the
But you
operator.
could.
You could if you chose, yes. But
So does the owner have to be in residence at the same time?
No, not
Or-
necessarily.
So my space is empty, somebody's living in it.
I mean, that's up to the operator. Either they can live there or they can choose to rent out the whole
As long
home.
as they have a permit, we don't mandate anything there.
Correct.
Okay.
Commissioner Mensing?
Yeah, I have a concern. My concern is that the proof of address doesn't actually mean that they've been living there, because I could present my mortgage document, which of course I'm paying for it and renting it out, and I believe I read a bill. So if the utilities are still in the owner's name, they don't actually have to be living there at all to have those two items. Also, I think 180 days is really hard to enforce. I think we're gonna be getting a lot of complaints, and there's no way to verify whether it's been 180 days or not. I'm not sure that it's fair to the neighbors to have people coming and going all the time, and then us to just say, well, prove it.
That's a valid point, and that's why I wanted this discussion, because it was kind of in the middle there. And again, other jurisdictions do have much more stringent requirements.
And if I may, I
Mr.
agree with Alana. I'm living here in this house here and that house over there. Both are doing short-term rentals. And every week, there's new people coming and going. I'm not happy with that, living right over here and seeing all these people coming and going, and then they disappear and somebody else shows up. And that's not, yeah. It's too, is sketchy a word?
It is.
And is it possible for us to start with like 90 days to see how it goes and then see what kind of feedback we get? Is that something that we would look at as a city, or what would you suggest for that?
Well, we could amend the ordinance and then come back and take a look at it if so warranted that it needed to be increased. But any change would certainly require another zoning ordinance text amendment approval process.
It would probably take some time to get some data anyway to see how it would work, so as not to go too far in the over direction, to give us a chance as the city to see how it's working and all that. Commissioner Beckett's?
One other question about residency. I scanned this, I read it earlier, scanned it again. I don't see anything that would prohibit sort of a landlord-tenant rights issue from popping up for residency that exceeds 30 days in a given environment. And I'd be very concerned about someone doing a short-term rental for greater than 30 days because of the potential for landlord-tenants rights issues sort of coming up. And so it'd be interesting to talk about maximum number of rental nights in the course of a single month for total number of months, where in 1 month it can't exceed 29 days. Because at 30 days or greater than 30 days, you may end up having sort of people adhering to like squatters' rights and sort of assuming landlord-tenant rights issues.
Now, by definition, it is limited to less than 30 consecutive days.
Okay.
So, but we probably need to make sure that that information is included and acknowledged in the application. Because that's actually a very good point.
Thank you.
Commissioner Collier?
So in effect, it wouldn't be a 6-month rental.
Correct. That's the amount of.
I agree with Michael, and now the 6 months is up and it's time for you to go. And well, I've been here 6 months, I'm gonna live here now.
There it is.
And it's like, how do you evict them?
Well, and
mean,
they do,
seriously,
once you
I
stay
can-
for more than 30 days,
I
that's
can see a lot
correct.
of stuff.
Okay, I see it in the new definition section. Thank you.
So, right, and it's not, I shouldn't have said it's 6 months, but it's 180 nightly rentals that you're permitted to do under this permit per
Then you need to
calendar
amend
year.
that they can't be consecutive.
Well, by definition, that's how it's written, but I think as part of the application process, we'll make that very clear.
Because the way I look at it right now, I could come over and say, Mickey, I want to rent your house for 6 months. And you say, okay, and we sign a paper.
Well, once it's defined, that actually is the term. And so if they rent out their house for more than 30 days, they're in violation of the zoning ordinance.
But that has
Under
to be
the
very,
short-term
very
rental.
clear, because to me, it's not that clear right
More
now.
than how many days? I'm sorry.
30.
Okay.
I would be in favor of changing the 180 to 30.
Just 30? Okay,
Or, I'm sorry, what was the minimum here? 60, I'm sorry.
60.
Well, yeah, I guess 60.
Okay.
And how many people would be involved in a rental?
There's maximum of 6, depending on the size of the dwelling.
Okay, now,
And the building, it's really based on the building code requirements about how many people can sleep in a room and whether or not that sleeping area has adequate
how many
egress.
bedrooms, and you can't have them sleeping in the garage?
Correct.
Then I'm gonna jump ahead to one more. If I've got 6 people coming in renting my house and all 6 people have a car,
Well, and that's why we have the limit. That's one of the reasons for the maximum amount of vehicles you can take. So yes, you're allowed 6 people, but in a single-family house, you can only bring 2 vehicles, 2 guest
you can't have
vehicles.
6 people.
Well, if there were 3 in each car, you could.
But also, how are we enforcing that?
Yeah.
It would have to be on a complaint basis. Agreed. A lot of this is, if you will, based on the honesty system. The regulations are put in place, and we rely on people abiding by the regulations, given the forms that they sign, and it would have to be a complaint and observing whether or not they are violating the regulations.
So right now, as it stands, we don't allow any short-term rentals.
Right, we don't allow them per the zoning ordinance, but yes, I mean, I'm assuming they're operating in the
They
city.
are, yeah. But it's
Technically,
easy.
they're
That they're
illegal
doing
from,
it, we can enforce it.
yes, correct.
So with the regulation in place, then we could enforce it, because right now, we know we have overcrowding.
Right,
in
well, and
houses.
that's kind of, that's a separate issue.
But
You
it
know, but
plays
in a
in.
way, if that's how they're advertising it, yes, that is different, but,
What I'm saying is, right now, if we go on Airbnb and search Manassas Park, we can go right now to those places and say, you're in violation.
correct.
But if we have this, we can no longer do that because we don't know how many nights they've actually rented it, and they're allowed to do it for 60 days. Right, is that correct? So we're actually gonna be making it harder to enforce.
And not only that, it could be, I'm gonna say, they're not renting, they're my family, they live here.
Well, if it's listed on Airbnb,
I mean,
yeah.
then that's a whole nother thing, so.
That's
I mean, I'm getting away from this now, but
I mean, enforcement could be a challenge, but at least there will be some regulations in place to do so. If you want to kind of keep track of the people who visit as guests of the property, I know one jurisdiction requires a guest book, but I don't know how you enforce people to sign it when they're in the rental. So I don't know how that works from a tax perspective, and if they have to like identify the number of days that they're staying there. If Dean's listening, I know he drafted the ordinance. I don't know if there is any provision for identifying the number of evenings when you're doing your taxes, or how you're giving that information to the city for tax purposes.
Yeah, the ordinance I drafted doesn't talk about the number of nights, if that's what you're asking.
Okay.
I mean,
Or
I'm
the
fine
number
with
of
people.
visitors or anything like that. It's just a tax ordinance for collecting taxes. I can pull it up real quick and verify though, but I don't remember anything like that in there.
I'm fine with guests. I'm fine with your mom staying with you for 4 months. I don't care. What I'm talking about is this Airbnb problem that we're already hearing complaints about from neighbors currently, which is just people coming and going, coming and going. And I think this is not gonna solve that problem. I think it's gonna make it worse. So personally, I'm just in favor of not moving forward with this and enforcing when we see a listing, going out and enforcing that.
Commissioner Evans?
Just going back to the vehicle issue. It's been a while, but something that's housed longer than 30 days, are they still required to get a city sticker?
Yes, I believe so.
Then, okay.
Other commissioners' thoughts about moving forward or not?
What are you asking us? We're not, are we
Commissioner
voting?
Mensing
Are
was
we-
thinking that this is not the right time for us to move forward on this.
I can't support it. There's too many what ifs.
There's so much variability in, as a person who travels the world in Airbnbs, there's so much variability that this is trying to control, but there are not enough guardrails up in the ordinance to actually sort of control what you're trying to control, especially when you talk about parking, number of vehicles, enforceability. I just worry that it's an ordinance that's trying to solve a problem that we haven't really wrapped ourselves around well enough to really understand. And I think there's some equity issues that are sort of built into this, where you have known homes that don't already meet the requirements, and would you then say that those people have to sort of seek some sort of variance or waiver in order to? Because I don't think we should create a rule that already excludes people from participating in something that could be meaningful and helpful to them because the age of their home is such that they would not be able to comply.
And I think Arlington doesn't have a fire alarm requirement or interconnected fire alarm. I think it just may say alarms in the sleeping rooms. That certainly can be stricken, but I know that's kind of like the modern and conventional fire safety for residents is to have the interconnecting, so they all go off at once.
Commissioner Collier?
Has the fire marshal been involved in this?
No, I did not ask for his,
Because maybe there should have some input.
okay,
I mean, just, if we're talking safety, we want to cover everything.
okay, that's a good point.
Because I would envision the fire marshal or an inspector going to the residents and to make sure that all the safety measures are in place. Instead of just taking someone's word for it, oh yeah, I've got everything I need. I got to see it.
An inspection. Yeah.
And I'll have to check with the fire marshal. I mean, typically they do not inspect residential homes, so I would have to see if this would be something that they would do as part of this type of process.
Would this not kind of blend over to a business? I mean,
Well,
just-
it's an accessory use to a dwelling, so.
I mean, if I'm making
that's-
money off of it, I'm running a business now.
But it's still a residential dwelling by building code.
And it's just too many what ifs.
Okay. Is there any direction the planning commission can give me for maybe modifications, or is it something that the majority is not interested in proceeding with?
Is the city able to do more of a study, like to gather input from city residents? I don't know if that's something that, like, put a survey together that would gather some data to see what more of what the city would be interested in, like the residents in the city would be interested in actually doing, to then factor into what has already been started here. I don't know if that makes sense to commissioners or what other.
I would say just based on the number of complaints we get, I'm not in support of this.
Okay. And so basically, you're saying if it's prohibited now, then that's actually the better course for the city in
Because of
terms of a
enforcement.
use.
Yeah, and nobody has been in favor of their neighbors coming and going. So just because of the enforcement portion, I'm not in favor.
Okay.
think Dean's gonna put the registry ordinance on the screen for us.
Okay. I may need help, Keith. Oh, is he going to share screen? Okay.
We'll just pull this over.
When they do this, one thing we might have to do, it's the other
1 second, Dean.
jurisdictions doing enforcement-wise.
More of that, maybe? I don't know, yeah, because.
Maybe, it could be enforced, maybe.
Perfect.
Too much unknown.
Share screen so he can see.
I mean, just when I was reading over it, it's like,
Hi, Dean, you're showing it.
I can't support it.
Oh, okay, it's showing up now? Okay.
I can read that real easy.
So this is something that I prepared a long time ago, so if you guys are moving forward, I'm gonna have to do that, kind of redo it a little bit just to verify it's still good, but some of the terms are the same that what Mickey used, so we'll probably have to marry them up and make sure they're good. What exactly was the question about the short-term rental registry ordinance? That, because I don't think I understood exactly what the question was.
I didn't ask a question about a registry.
Yeah, no, me neither.
I don't remember asking one about the registry.
It doesn't make any difference to me.
Yeah.
I guess mine was about the 180 days, if it was so consecutively, and she said no already, so.
So there's nothing in here that, it does talk here about what a short-term rental is for a period of fewer than 30 days. It's the same as what Mickey used. So the idea that it would go beyond 30 days consecutively, that wouldn't be permitted in either one of these ordinances. If that was the question. And this is, like I said, this is a tax purposes, or for tax purposes. So they have to register with the Commission on Revenue in addition to getting a permit from the zoning administrator. And I can make this smaller so that you get a couple side by side if you want. I don't know if you can see that very well or not.
Dean, am I hearing this right, or are we more concerned about how do we enforce this, and how do we seek compliance?
Right. Yes.
Well, this is going on right now anyway. And at least one member of the governing body has been pushing to get something on the books so that we can get an idea of how many of these things we have and to somehow control them. Because right now it's a free-for-all. We're not getting any tax revenue, or we are getting a very small amount of tax revenue from the few that are actually complying with the law, which is, that they're supposed to be paying the taxes through, I believe, either VRBO or Airbnb. I think there's an arrangement. I know Airbnb is fighting it. They don't want to have to be the person or the entity that collects. So a couple of the smaller short-term rental places are remitting tax revenue somehow. I'm not sure if it's through Airbnb or VRBO or just by themselves, but the idea of this is to make sure that the Commissioner of Revenue knows what's going on so she can properly get the transient occupancy tax, which is something that's levied against all lodgers, whether in hotels, bed and breakfast, or now short-term rentals. The problem is that our ordinance doesn't currently allow this stuff, and that's why Mickey wants to put something together, and we need to have something in the zoning ordinance that regulates these things. So that's why she put a lot of effort into getting this thing together, was because it's already happening. So unless we're going to have some sort of enforcement that goes out and makes sure that people who are violating the current law, which is, you're not allowed to do it, then, and I don't see us being able to hire enough people to go out and enforce that, then the idea is to have a permitting system so that now we can encourage them to register with us. We get the revenue. We can also go in and verify that they have safety requirements are being met, and we are aware of what's going on.
Mr. Collier and then Commissioner Evans.
If people are already doing it illegally, they're not going to comply. Just my
Well,
opinion.
a lot of them are doing it illegally and they don't know that they're doing it illegally. That's the problem. So if we pass this ordinance and we get the word out, this ordinance is passed, then they will hopefully come and register with the city and seek the permits. Alternatively, if you want to have some, a strong advertising program to let people know that it's illegal in the city, then do that. But right now, I don't think a lot of them are aware of what the law is.
Commissioner Evans?
I just think on my side of this, I'm thinking that an ordinance should be in place, because if we don't have an ordinance, they're still doing this and we have no control. At least with an ordinance in place that meets some of our needs, we have some type of control and some way of monitoring certain things. Not everything, it's not perfect, but that's where my thought process is.
Commissioner Mensing?
I just have a problem with people doing something illegally, their neighbors coming to us and complaining, and then us saying, okay, let's do it, rather than us going out and enforcing it. I think we should spend our effort on educating the people that what they're doing is illegal and enforcing it, just like we do other code enforcement issues. Instead, we're gonna make it easier for this to happen and harder to enforce. So I think the fundamental problem is that people are already upset that this is happening, and we're not stopping the problem, we're just saying, okay. I don't see how this solves the problem of people coming out to us saying, people are coming and going, please help us with this. This is not gonna help solve that.
Commissioner Beckett?
I think there are multiple issues, and I think that everyone here has a different perspective as to why this is not a good idea right now. My concern is the lack of a clear business process that sort of starts at the beginning, goes through sort of like enforcement. And if there's no way to enforce what you're putting into place in a reasonable way, and there's no way to enforce what you have right now, I do believe like education and letting people know is at least the first step in this process. But if it's all going to be on the honor system, then you're making rules that that have no teeth. It's a gummy rule.
And we're putting the impetus on the people who are already upset to prove how many days, how many people, how many cars. That's not something I want to do full-time, just because my neighbor's not in compliance with something.
Any additional questions or comments from commissioners for Administrator Barry? Thank you. And I don't see any members of the public present to speak for this. So for the record, no members of the public present. At this time, if we've discussed it enough during the hearing, I'll go ahead and ask for a motion to close the hearing, and then we can further discuss and decide on what motion. So at this time, I'd like to request a motion to close the public hearing.
Moved.
Motion, second?
Second?
Second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries unanimously. The time is 7:44, excuse me, 7:44. Would anyone care to begin discussion? Is there, from the standpoint of a motion, are we, from what we were discussing, it doesn't sound like we're ready to move forward. Did I hear enough of that regarding not moving forward on this?
Right.
So if I were to offer a motion to recommend denial of zoning ordinance text amendment ZOTA number 23-05, is there a motion for that?
To deny it?
Can you
Or
add,
what would be,
Yeah, to deny it.
do you
Yeah, I
want?
just want to clarify.
Yes,
Move to deny.
That's,
Yes.
that was my initial offering if commissioners,
Moved.
okay, there's a
could you
motion for that.
add in there somewhere for more information for further consideration?
Or
So-
is there a way to table this?
I'm fine with just denying it. I don't know what further, I think we need to enforce, I don't know, I think it needs to be brought back completely different.
In a different form.
Yeah. I don't know what further information would change my mind.
Dean, what would be the appropriate language if they wanted to defer or table their decision or have the amendment come back to them at some later date?
Okay, so they've just held a public hearing, so we've taken care of that. So as long as they don't vote to deny or vote to recommend denial or approval, and they want to bring it back with direction to you to modify it based upon the discussion tonight, if they have some definitive modification, that you do that and then bring it back for a vote. And they can set it for the next meeting if they want, or 2 meetings out. I forget the exact amount of time they have to actually vote on it. I can look it up if necessary, but I'm pretty sure they can push it out for a couple months if they need to.
That's just an option.
What kind of time does Mickey need to?
Well, that's sort of where we are. If do we want to deny it and have it come back? Right, do we want to deny it and have it come back new again as an amendment another time? Or do we want to table it for the 1 or 2 meetings and then see what changes can be made to it? I guess those are the 2 options on here.
I guess
I
it-
don't see
Well-
what bringing it back in
guess
1 or 2
denial
meetings
is-
is gonna do. I'm
Okay.
happy
do
to
the
take
denial.
what I am.
Yes.
Let's do that.
Okay. All right. Great. Then I will, from what I'm hearing, does anyone care to make a motion to recommend denial of ZOTA number 23-05?
Moved.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstention? 1 abstention. So 4 are opposed and voting for a denial, recommending denial, and 1 abstention. The motion carries to recommend denial.
Too late. I was gonna add something.
Oh,
It's okay.
okay. We have, moving along, we have no unfinished business, no report of special committees. Any informational update from community development staff? Administrator Barry?
I do have just a few updates for you. There are going to be some economic development meetings happening starting Sunday, August 20th at various locations throughout the city. I believe this is the city manager presenting some economic development along Manassas Drive that he will be presenting. This information is on the website, but it will be Sunday, August 20th at 11. The remaining times are at 7 p.m., and that would be Monday, August 21st at the Community Center, Wednesday, August 23rd at Cougar Elementary, and then the Monday after, August 28th at City Hall, and that will also be on YouTube, and that would be at 7 p.m. So I think there'll be some, Monday, August 28th at 7, and you can, it will be, I guess, here in the chambers, so it'll also be on YouTube.
Is it possible to get that emailed to us?
Yes, I'm happy to do that.
Thank you.
Will it be the same presentation every time, or?
That's
something
my
different?
understanding. Mhm.
Same thing, okay. Thank you, Mickey.
And just along those lines, I just wanted to let you know that the 2 businesses in City Hall are going to begin their interior improvements. Their permits were issued probably a month or so ago, but the actual work is going to be starting, I believe, tomorrow. So I'm looking forward to that. Those 2, La Finca, which is a Mexican restaurant, and Girani's Coffee, which is a coffee shop. So we're very ecstatic about that. I'm sure that might be part of the update, but just wanted to let the commissioners that what's going on in City Hall. And then lastly, I just wanted to remind everybody that there's a Household Hazardous Waste Day at Public Works on Saturday, September 9th, giving you a little more notice, from 8 to noon, and that's at 331 Manassas Drive. So you can drop off your paints, batteries. There's more description on what's being collected, but you have to go to the trash and Public Works, the trash collection webpage to find out more detail. And I'll email both of those informational items to you, so all the commissioners do have those dates in front of them.
There was talk of the recycle units being placed. Has that been determined yet?
Calvin, do you know anything about I guess it's the purple, or just the big recycling? You don't mean the glass, you mean the actual big recycle?
There was going to be
The cardboard one?
like a, what's my word?
Okay,
The other one has to be manufactured still.
Okay,
Trying to get another one, but that one actually, the one we had was custom made. It was purchased and custom made by Dominion, by
Okay.
Patriot. And now that we've requested another one, they actually had to wait for the back order dumpster to arrive, and they still have to retrofit.
thank you.
where's the proposed location for that one?
That one, I believe, is gonna go to Signal Park.
It's Signal, okay.
Do we have any updates on Connor Drive, when it'll be finished?
You thought he was getting out of here.
Yeah.
So Connor Drive, Phase 2 out of 3 of the full depth reconstruction is completed. We had a bit of a holdup because as we were doing Phase 1 and 2, we noticed that there was really poor soils, really poor subbase. So we did have to stop, get a design from the engineer to use concrete treated aggregate to sort of restore the subbase in that Phase 2 area. We will then have to wait and see how Phase 1 sets up, and we'll proof roll that before final coat to see if we need to remove the base that was installed and actually CTA treat that as well. But they're working towards getting Phase 3 of the full depth reconstruction done. Novec was out today to try to finish or start their utility relocation where the new pavement will go. But unfortunately, there's a lot of stockpiles and stuff in their way, and somehow all of the utility marks got made to disappear by on-site equipment. So Novec actually did not stay today. They did not continue their relocation work. So we are hitting some delays. I think we're still on schedule to hopefully wrap up all of this paving and sort of road stoppage activity September. I don't know how long we'll be until we're finally having a grand opening of the new section and saying that the project is substantially complete. But I think we'll be out of everybody's way by September as far as road closures and traffic congestion around that center of town area. So,
Cool, thanks.
Any other questions from commissioners?
May I make a comment?
Commissioner
I just want
Collier?
to say thank you, Mickey, for the work you do. Unfortunately, tonight wasn't successful for you.
Quite all right, I enjoyed the debate and discussion.
But you do a great job. Calvin, you as well. I commend both of you. Are we at the end? I have one more thing. Tonight is my last meeting. I know, it's a happy time. It's a happy time. And if Keith can take a picture of us, since we're all here this time. And it's bittersweet, but it's, you all know I've been planning this move, and it's by the end of the month, I will no longer be a resident of Manassas Park. I've been here too many years. So,
We're going to miss
but
you.
it's good. Well, thank you, and I've certainly enjoyed this opportunity. When I was asked to do this, I said, I don't know anything about this, and Jeanette called me and said, Martha, give it a chance. She said, you'll learn, and it has been a very, very enlightening opportunity, I guess, that and working with all you guys and getting to know you, it's been real. And I've been calling him Kevin ever since he's known me. So he kind of just answers to Kevin now.
looks like a
"Who-
Kevin."
Who's Keith? He looks like a Kevin to me, so.
So we'll take 2 photos.
Yeah, get together.
Standing up.
No, that was my hand was in my face.
We'll take 1 standing up.
And can I have my name tag?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the commissioner one, yeah. I'll hang it on my front door. I'm the commissioner of the neighborhood. Tighten up, tighten up, tighten up. Thank you, thank you.
Well, it's been a pleasure, Martha. Thank you for,
Thank you,
it's
Lester.
been a real pleasure to serve with you.
Yeah, thank you, Martha, for being an involved member of your community. You've been involved with everything. You've been at meetings.
I know, I said, don't ever get to know Lena Connor. You're, all of a sudden, you're no more than you know. So. But it's been good, it's all been good.
Well, thank you for letting us know, and we'll be missing you. Well, unless there are any other surprises like that, would anyone care to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion, second?
Second.
Second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
My last official duty.
Motion carries unanimously. The time is 7:56. Martha, best wishes to you. Best
Thank
wishes.
you, thank you. Actually,